The results and examination of product packaging revealed added sugar in the form of sucrose or honey in samples of Nido, a follow-up milk formula brand intended for use for infants aged 1 and above. Cerelac, a cereal aimed at children aged between 6 months and 2 years. In Nestle's main European markets, including the UK, there is no added sugar in formulas for young children, while series aimed at older toddlers contain added sugars. There is now in products targeted at babies between 6 months and 1 year. Lawrence Gabriel, public eyes agriculture and nutrition expert, said Nestle must put an end to these dangerous double standards and stop adding sugar in all products for children under 3 years old in every part of the world. The US and its allies planned fresh sanctions against Iran over its unprecedented attack on Israel, seeking to dissuade Israel from a major escalation as its war cabinet was set to meet for a third time on Wednesday to decide a response. While Saturday's night's attack caused no deaths and little damage thanks to the air defenses and countermeasures of Israel and its allies, it has increased fears that violence rooted in the 6-month-old Gaza war is spreading, with the risk of open war between longtime adversaries, Iran and Israel. Israel's military chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, has promised Iran's launch of more than 300 missiles, cruise missiles, and drones at Israeli territory will be met with a response, but gave no details. An Israeli government source said the war cabinet session scheduled for Tuesday had been put off until Wednesday without elaborating. Hoping to steer Israel away from massive retaliation, the US and Europe flagged a toughening of economic and political sanctions against Iran. The US is planning to impose new sanctions targeting Iran's missile and drone program in the coming days and expects its allies will be following suit, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in a statement on Tuesday. Earlier, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the U.S. would use sanctions and work with allies to keep disrupting Iran's malign and destabilizing activity. She told a news conference in Washington all options to disrupt Iran's terrorist financing were on the table, and she expected further sanctions against Iran to be announced soon. Authorities and communities across the United Arab Emirates were clearing debris on Wednesday after a torrential downpour killed at least one person and caused damage to homes and businesses. The UAE witnessed a record rainfall with 254 millimeters falling on Al Ain on Tuesday in less than 24 hours, according to the National Meteorological Center. That was the most since records began in 1949 because before the country was established in 1971. Although heavy rains had eased by late Tuesday, disruptions were continuing on Wednesday, with Emirates Airlines in check for passengers in Dubai Airport until midnight. Dubai International Airport, one of the world's busiest, said it was facing significant disruptions after the heavy rains delayed or diverted flights and had impacted flight crews. Passengers departing Dubai were advised against heading to the airport to check their flight status with their airline. We are working hard to recover operations as quickly as possible in very challenging conditions, the airport wrote on X. Emirates said passengers who were already in transit would continue to be processed, but warned that delays to departures and arrivals should be expected. The Dubai Airport website showed hours-long delays for some arrival and departure flights. Local media reported that an elderly Emirati man in his 70s died on Tuesday morning when his vehicle was caught in a flash flood in the Ras Al Khaimah Emirate in the country's north. In neighboring Oman, 19 people died, including school children, after 3 consecutive days of heavy rain, according to Omani media, which published images of flooded communities. The Times of Oman reported that more than was expected on Wednesday. In Dubai, the skies were clear, but in some areas, the roads were quiet after the government ordered its employees and all schools to work remotely for a second consecutive day. UAE media and social media posts showed significant damage from the torrential downpour in some parts of the country, including collapsed roads and homes inundated by water. Social media posts on Tuesday showed flooded roads and car parks with some vehicles completely submerged. Sheikh Zayed Road, a 12-lane highway through Dubai, was partially flooded, leaving people stuck in kilometers-long traffic jam for hours. Israeli tanks pushed back into parts of the northern Gaza Strip on Tuesday, which they had left weeks ago, while warplanes conducted airstrikes on Rafah, the Palestinians' large refuge in the south of the territory, killing and wounding several people, medics and residents said. Residents reported an internet outage in the areas of Beit Hanun and Jabalia in northern Gaza. Tanks advanced into Beit Hanun and surrounded some schools where displaced families have taken refuge, said residents and the media outlets of the militant Palestinian group, Hamas. Occupation soldiers ordered all families inside the schools and the nearby houses where the tanks had advanced to evacuate. The soldiers detained many men, one resident of northern Gaza told, which is via a chat app. Beit Hanun, home to 60,000 people, was one of the first areas targeted by Israeli ground offensive in Gaza last October. Heavy bombardment turned most of Beit Hanun, once known as the basket of fruit because of its orchards, into a ghost town comprising piles of rubble. Many families who had returned to Beit Hanun and Jabalia in recent weeks after Israeli forces withdrew began moving out again on Tuesday because of the new raid, some residents said. Palestinian health officials said an Israeli strike had killed 4 people and wounded several others in Rafah, where over half of Gaza's 2.3 million people are sheltering and bracing for a planned Israeli ground offensive into the city, which borders Egypt. Just before midnight, an Israeli airstrike hit a house in Rafah and killed 7 people, including children, and wounded several others. Palestinian health officials said there was no immediate Israeli comment. Palestinian health officials and Hamas media said an Israeli airstrike had also killed 11 Palestinians, including children, in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip. The Israel military did not immediately respond to requests for comments. My brothers were sitting by the door. My brother was injured and his cousin too, and I lost my son. I do not have a house nor a husband nor anything anymore, said Wafa Issa al-Nuri, whose son Mohammed and husband were killed in the strike. He was playing by the door. We didn't do anything. I swear we didn't do anything, she said. The Hamas-run Interior Ministry also said an Israeli airstrike had hit a police car in the Tufar district of Gaza City, killing 7 police officers. A third meeting of Israel's war cabinet set for Tuesday to decide on a response to Iran's first-ever direct attack was put off until Wednesday as Western allies eyed swift new sanctions against Iran to help dissuade Israel from a major escalation. Military Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi had promised that Saturday night's launch of more than 300 missiles, cruise missiles and drones from Iran at Israeli territory will be met with a response, but gave no details. While the attack caused no deaths and little damage thanks to the air defenses and countermeasures of Israel and its allies, it has increased fears that violence rooted in the 6-month-old Gaza war is spreading, with the risk of open war between long-time adversaries, Iran and Israel. Iran launched the attack in retaliation for an airstrike on its embassy compound in Damascus on April 1st, attributed to Israel, but has signaled that it now deems the matter closed. An Israeli government source said the war cabinet session, scheduled for Tuesday, had been put off until Wednesday without elaborating. President Joe Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the weekend that the United States, Israel's main protector, would not participate in an Israeli counter-strike. Together with European allies, Washington instead strove on Tuesday to toughen economic and political sanctions against Iran in an attempt to steer Israel away from massive retaliation. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani on Wednesday called on Israel to halt its military operations in Gaza, reiterating that it was time for a ceasefire in the Palestinian enclave. Italy initially backed Israel's actions following the October 7 attack by Hamas on its southern territories, but more recently it has softened its support in the light of the thousands of civilian deaths. In an interview, Tajani stressed that the war in Gaza was triggered by the Hamas's barbaric assault. He then added, however, now a ceasefire is necessary. Israel must stop the military operations that have massively affected the Palestinian population. The interview was conducted ahead of a meeting of foreign ministers of the group of 7 wealthy nations, which will be hosted by Tajani on the Italian island of Capri. Italy holds the rotating presidency of the G7. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani on Tuesday said Iraq has not received any reports or indications that missiles or drones were launched from Iraq during Iran's attack on Israel. Iraq is a rare ally of both Washington and Tehran. Iraqi airspace was a main route, say Iran informed them, as well as other countries in the region ahead of the attack. Our position is clear, and we will not allow Iraq to be thrown into its first direct attack on the country in retaliation for a suspected Israeli airstrike on its embassy compound in Damascus on April 11 that killed elite military officers. Myanmar's detained former leader and Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi has been moved from prison to house arrest, a spokesperson for the military government told media. Since the weather is extremely hot, it is not only for Aung San Suu Kyi, for all those who need necessary precautions, especially elderly prisoners. We are working to protect them from a heat stroke, junta spokesperson Major General Zhao Min-tun said in comments late on Tuesday. It was not immediately clear where Suu Kyi had been moved to. Zhao Min-tun did not respond to requests for comments. Suu Kyi was held under a house arrest for a total of 15 years under a previous junta at a decrepit colonial-style family residence on Yangon's Inia Lake, where she famously gave impassioned speeches to crowds of supporters over the metal gates of the property. Suu Kyi, 78, has been detained by the Myanmar military since it overthrew her government in a 2021 coup. She faces 27 years in prison for crimes ranging from treason and bribery to violations of the telecommunications law, charges she denies. In February, her son Kim Aris said she was being held in solitary confinement and that she was in good spirits even if her health is not as good as it was in the past. World leaders and pro-Delo government called for the unconditional release of Suu Kyi and U Win Mint, Myanmar's ousted president, who has also been moved to house arrest, according to the media reports. Moving them from prison to houses is good, as houses are better than prisons. However, they must be unconditionally freed. They must take full responsibility for the health and security of Aung San Suu Kyi and U Win Mint, spokesperson Cao Zhao said on Tuesday. China will hold air defense and live fire drills near its border with Myanmar from Wednesday, state media said, in this month's second round of such exercises as fighting between Myanmar's ruling junta and rebel forces intensifies. The drills follow a significant escalation of the conflict last week when rebel forces captured the Myanmar town of Maiwadi, a key trading outpost near the Thai border, prompting a stream of refugees into Thailand. State broadcaster CCTV said this week's drills by China's Southern Theater Command formed part of an annual training exercise without referring to the fighting in the neighboring nation. China's troops are always prepared to on several fronts since overthrowing an elected government in 2021, but defeats in frontier areas since last October have lost its control of tracts bordering Bangladesh, China and India. Concerned about trade disruptions and an influx of refugees, China has acted as a mediator in the conflict, which has sent hundreds of thousands fleeing across the border. But Myanmar's northern border with China had relatively been calm since ceasefire talks that Beijing brokered in January. This month's earlier land and air drills at the Myanmar border also featured no mention of direct links to the conflict in the neighbor's north. In January, China called for an immediate ceasefire when 5 people were hurt in its southwestern province of Yunnan after an artillery shell crossed from Myanmar. At the time of a live-fire exercise last November, China's military said armed conflicts in Myanmar had led to casualties and complicated the security situation, adding that it had a responsibility to protect lives and properties in border areas. Ships remained docked at Greek ports and train services were halted on Wednesday as transport workers joined a 24-hour strike by private workers to demand higher pay to cope with rising living costs. Bus and taxi drivers also walked off the job for a few hours as part of the labor action called by Greece's largest private sector union, GSEE. Road traffic was disrupted in central Athens as hundreds of striking workers rallied outside the parliament to the 2018 debt crisis was when wages were slashed as part of painful austerity in turn for 3 international bailouts. Greece's economy has been growing at nearly twice the Eurozone rate, and the country last year regained investment-grade status after 13 years in the junk category. The monthly minimum gross wage was raised by 6.4% to €830 this month, the 4th such rise in 5 years, but workers say the pay rises are not enough to keep up with rising food and housing costs. The high prices are eating up any minimum wage increase, a senior GSEE official, Nikos Koussoukis, said. We cannot pay for another crisis. We cannot continue like this. We want real wages increases. The Greek average monthly salary of €1,175 is 20% lower than 15 years ago, while unemployment remains above 10%, the second highest in the European Union behind Spain. The Conservative government of Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, which won re-election last June, has promised to raise the monthly minimum wage to €950 by 2027 when its term ends and increase the average wage by more than 25% to €1,500 in the same period. Half of Denmark's old stock exchange was completely burnt out, with only outer walls remaining, after flames engulfed the building and caused the roof to collapse in Tuesday's devastating fire, Danish officials said on Wednesday. The blaze that ripped through the 400-year-old landmark, toppling its spire in a scene reminiscent of the 2019 fire at Paris' Notre Dame Cathedral, was still burning in some hard-to-access places. Roughly half the Dutch Renaissance-style building was saved, although massive damage still occurred as firefighters had drenched it in water. Everything that was once part of the story partitions and building structures inside has been burnt away, Copenhagen Fire Department Operations Chief Frank Trier Mikkelsen told Reuters, referring to the part of the building worst hit. Only the outer walls remain, leaving an empty shell. Emergency services were joined by passers-by on Tuesday in carrying large paintings away from the building shortly after the fire broke out in a race to save historic artifacts from the flames. There are probably 1,000 objects in there, but the things I would say are the most important have been saved. Brian Mikkelsen, CEO of the Danish Chamber of Commerce, which owns the building, told public broadcaster The Hour. He said employees and firefighters knew what to get out as they already had a worst-case emergency plan in place. Putting out the fire was taking longer than expected due to lingering pockets of flames around found in the rubble, and the work was expected to last at least until Thursday morning. Large containers had been installed overnight to support damaged walls and prevent the historic brickwork from collapsing, fire officials said. The building no longer houses the stock exchange but serves as the Chamber of Commerce headquarters. A Russian missile attack killed at least 9 residents and damaged buildings and municipal infrastructure in the northern Ukrainian city of Chernihiv on Wednesday, local officials said. The city's acting mayor, Oleksandr Lomarko, said 3 explosions ripped through a busy part of the city after just 9 a.m. local time, hitting a multi-story building. Unfortunately, Russia continues to engage in terrorist activity against the civilians and civilian infrastructure, as confirmed by this strike on Chernihiv once again, Lomarko said. He said that several buildings, social infrastructure, and many private cars were damaged. Regional Governor Yashevlav Chaus said at least 9 people were killed and more than 20 injured. The head of Chernihiv Regional Hospital said at least 18 people wounded in the attack were being treated there. More injured civilians have been taken to other hospitals, he said, urging residents to donate blood. Unverified social media videos showed flames and columns of black smoke rising over the historic city that lies about 150 kilometers from the capital Kyiv. People ran from a bus to take cover. Emergency services and medics rushed to the site of the strike, officials said. Russia, which denies targeting civilians, invaded Ukraine in February 2022 and has launched thousands of missiles and drones in Ukrainian cities and villages in attacks that have killed hundreds of civilians. In recent weeks, Russia has intensified its attacks on Ukrainian cities, targeting the country's power sector and other critical infrastructure. Andrei Yermak, head of President Vladimir Zelensky's office, on Wednesday reiterated Kyiv's plea for more air defense. The name of late Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar cannot be registered as an EU trademark, the European Court of Justice ruled on Wednesday after his brother tried to lay claim. The court upheld the decision of the EU's Intellectual Property Office (EU) that refused a trademark application by Escobar Inc. in 2022. EU IPO correctly found that those persons would associate the name of Pablo Escobar with drug trafficking and narcoterrorism and with the crimes and suffering resulting therefrom rather than with his possible good deeds in favor of the poor in Colombia, the court said in a statement. Escobar Inc. was founded in Puerto Rico by Pablo Escobar's brother, Roberto de Jesus Escobar Javira, who spent 12 years in prison for his role in his brother's criminal organization. Javira said in 2020 that his company would launch a foldable smartphone called the Escobar Fold 1. The company currently sells a cryptocurrency called Escobar Cash, according to its website. Pablo Escobar led one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations, the Medellin Cartel. His fortune made from trafficking cocaine was estimated by Forbes in 1987 to have reached over $3 billion, although some accounts put it at much higher. Thousands of people were killed in cartel-related violence during and after his death in 1993 when he was shot by security forces. The water level in the Tabor River around the city of Kurgan in Russia's southern Urals has exceeded the dangerous level mark, RIA State News Agency reported on Wednesday, citing local authorities. The river in the city, which is the administrative center of the border Kurgan region, straddling the Tabor River near the border with Kazakhstan, rose by 123 cms in the 24 hours to Wednesday morning, reaching 865 centimeters, RIA reported. In the center of Kurgan, evacuation sirens have been blasting every 2 hours, RIA reported. Urging residents to flee to safety, officials said the river reaches a danger level once it crosses 850 centimeters. More than 660 residential houses were flooded in the region by Wednesday morning. Residents of 14 settlements in the Ishim district of the Tiumen region in southwestern Siberia were also being evacuated on Wednesday, with threats coming from the rising level of the Ishim River, officials said. Water levels in rivers in swaths of Russia's Ural and southwestern Siberian regions, as well as adjacent areas of Kazakhstan, were still rising rapidly, officials said. The disaster has been caused by the fast melting of large snowfalls amid heavy rain, swelling the tributaries of several of Europe's largest rivers. The total number of people evacuated from their home rose towards 200,000 late Tuesday after the governor of Russia's Tyumen region told residents of Ishim, a town of 65,000, that they should leave urgently. British trade union law British workers' human rights as it does not protect them from sanctions short of dismissal for taking part in industrial action, the United Kingdom's Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday. Fiona Mercer, a care worker and trade unionist from the northwest of England, took legal action against her employer after she was suspended in 2019 during planned strike action, which prevented her from talking to her colleagues. In 2022, the Court of Appeal in London ruled British trade union law may be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, but nonetheless dismissed her case after an intervention by the British government. On Wednesday, after a nearly 5-year legal battle, the UK's highest court upheld Mercer's appeal in a landmark decision on trade union rights. Workers who are dismissed for taking part in lawful strike action are protected in UK trade union law and can bring a lawsuit for unfair dismissal, the Supreme Court said. However, employees who face disciplinary action short of dismissal have no express protection, which the Supreme Court ruled puts the UK in breach of the ECHR. The right of an employer to impose any sanction at all short of dismissal for participation in lawful industrial action nullifies the right to take lawful strike action, Judge Ingrid Simler said in the court's written ruling. She added that the current state of the law encourages and legitimizes unfair and unreasonable conduct by employers. Wednesday's landmark decision follows a protracted period of industrial action by workers in many industries who have gone on strike to improve their pay and conditions. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We will be back after this break.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today. Only on ATN.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what's the blood.
I have fought very firmly.
Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now the rest of our stories. U.S. President Joe Biden will call on Wednesday for sharply higher tariffs on Chinese metal products as part of a package of policies aimed at pleasing steelworkers in the swing state of Pennsylvania at the risk of angering Beijing. In campaign stops in the steel city of Pittsburgh, Biden is expected to propose raising to 25% the tariffs imposed by his predecessor, Donald Trump, on Chinese steel and aluminum products, according to an administration official. The protests targeted currently face up to a 7.5 levy under a Trump-era policy under Section 304 of the U.S. trade law, which Biden ordered a review of in 2022. The Biden administration is also pressuring Mexico to prohibit China from selling its metal products indirectly through the U.S. border country. At the same time, it is launching an investigation into Chinese trade practices across the shipbuilding, maritime, and logistics sectors, which could lead to more tariffs. The measures are set to be unveiled as Biden visits the headquarters of the United Steelworkers Union, will invite blowback from China at a time of already heightened tensions between the two biggest economies. Trump's imposition of tariffs during his 2017-2021 presidency were followed by China retaliating with its own levies. Pennsylvania is one of a half-dozen battleground states likely to decide the November election rematch between Biden and Trump. The economy ranks among voters' top concerns. China and the United States should explore ways for a pragmatic and cooperative relationship between their militaries and gradually accumulate mutual trust, the Chinese defense minister was cited as saying by the ministry on Wednesday. The minister, Dong Jun, in a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, also said the Taiwan issue is core of China's core interests and must never be hurt, and that the U.S. should respect China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in the South China Sea. Haiti's government on Tuesday named the members of a transitional council set to take power when Prime Minister Ariel Henry steps down, inching closer to putting in place measures that could restore security in the violence-racked country. The council is expected to choose a leader and a prime minister and wield certain presidential powers by majority vote. Its mandate runs to February 2026. The government, however, did not give a date for the council's installment, and local lawyers have warned that the process of confirming the members could be long and several nominees could be rejected. Henry left Haiti in February to seek international help for the country's police in their battles with armed and powerful gangs when worsening violence blocked his return. Henry announced his resignation. Finance Minister Michael Patrick Boisvet has since been in charge, though his actions have been limited to signing off on 9-time curfews. The Transitional Council, which had been long delayed and whose creation was only formalized on Friday, will include 7 voting members and 2 non-voting members. The voting members are former Central Bank Governor Fritz Alfonso Jean, former ambassador to the Dominican Republic Smith Augustine, Barrister Emmanuel Vatilier, former Senate President Edgar LeBlanc, ex-Senator Louis Gerald Gillis, businessman Laurent Saint-Cyr, and Leslie Volatier, a former diplomat. The non-voting observers are evangelical pastor Fresnel Joseph and Regine Abraham, who once worked for the World Bank and the country's Environment Ministry. Violence has escalated in Henry's absence, with gangs attacking areas they do not control yet. Ports and the capital airport remain closed. At least 360 people have been displaced, and nearly half the country is going hungry. Canada will provide up to $5 billion Canadian dollars in loan guarantees to help indigenous groups invest in natural resource projects, the Liberal government said in its annual budget on Tuesday. The program could give the groups major investment opportunities, from the government-owned Trans Mountain Oil Pipeline to TC Energy's Coastal GasLink pipeline power lines in wind and solar projects. That is going to be an absolute game-changer for indigenous companies and communities that are trying to get involved in the renewable electricity sector, said Fernando Mello, Federal Director of the Canadian Renewable Energy Association. It's a great start. The Liberal government, which came to power in late 2015, has invested billions of dollars to improve the living conditions of Canada's First Nation, who have higher levels of poverty and lower life expectancy than other Canadians. A federal loan guarantee would allow First Nations to borrow at favorable rates enabling them to reap larger profits. The loan guarantee program is sector agnostic, indicating that it will be available for all forms of resource projects, including those involving oil and gas, said Nilo Edwards, CEO of First Nations Major Projects Coalition, an indigenous-owned organization that advises First Nations on project investments. Not all nations have the same sector opportunity, so that kind of approach is a sign of fairness, Edwards said. For emergency companies, indigenous partnerships provide capital infusions and a way to speed projects through approval from provincial governments that in some cases require First Nations investment. Details have not yet been published on how soon the loan guarantees will be available. Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro ordered the closure of his government's embassy and 2 consulates in Ecuador in protest of Ecuador's detention of former Vice President Jorge Glass, the Venezuelan Information Ministry said in a statement on Tuesday. Ecuadorian police arrested Glass, twice convicted of corruption, on April 5th, removing him from the Mexican embassy where he had been living since December. The arrest prompted Mexico, which had offered Glass political asylum, to suspend diplomatic relations with Ecuador. The head of a review into Australia's national environmental laws has accused Western Australia's mining industry and media of spreading misinformation about the Albanese government's nature reforms. Graham Samuel told a federal state Senate hearing into the extinction crisis that the naysayers in WA's mining sector had run a campaign of negative publicity against improved environmental protections. He also said conservation groups that have criticized the federal government for saying the introduction of new environment laws should take a chill pill, and that he believed they would ultimately be satisfied. Samuel's comments come a day after the government confirmed it would carve up its planned environmental legislation and would introduce bills for 2 new bodies, one for environment protection and one for environmental information, in the coming weeks. But its broader package of promised new nature laws, including national environmental standards, has been deferred to an unspecified date, with Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek giving no guarantee it would be delivered in this term of government. Samuel's 2020 review found Australian government had failed to protect the country's unique wildlife for 2 decades, and that plants, animals, and ecosystems were in unsustainable decline. I saw that there was one media outlet in Western Australia yesterday that was claiming credit for having organized for these laws to go on to the back burner, Samuel said on Wednesday. He said his response was to quote Mark Twain and say the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated because, frankly, I think they are. I doubt that I'll be red-faced when we do actually see the laws that are being proposed. Samuel said he was concerned about potential misinformation that is coming through from the mining sector and certain media outlets in WA. He said there had been some regression from a collaborative process established between diverse environment and business stakeholders when the review was underway in 2019. The government has been accused of breaking a promise to deliver a single package of environmental legislation to fix Australia's broken system of nature laws. Samuel told the hearing that conservation groups worried about the pace of reform should take a chill pill, he said. But witnesses and senators at Wednesday's hearing noted the government's new approach, which will see different pieces of legislation introduced in stages, was not consistent with Samuel's own report. Samuel's report did recommend reforms be undertaken in tranches, with the third and final tranche to be a full rewrite of Australia's national laws. More than 500 horses have been found dead near Wagga Wagga in what is alleged to be a possible illegal knackery operation. The animals were discovered after Wagga Wagga City Council and New South Wales Police received reports alleging that horses had been butchered at a private property near the regional city and their remains left in a dry creek bed. Guardian Australia understands Wagga councillors were briefed on the incident on Monday night and told that a cool room containing horse meat had been located on the property. Some of these carcasses were no more than skeletal remains, while others were killed relatively evidence for possible offences and regulatory action against a range of NSW state government legislation. The investigation is ongoing. Guardian Australia spoke to the operator who disputed the council's allegations about the number of horses found. The operator said there were 15 to 20 carcasses on the property of horses they had killed to make pet food for their own animals, not for commercial purposes. The operator confirmed they ran a Brumby rehoming operation. A handful of the dead horses were Brumbies that were not able to be rehomed, they said. Service saw no signs of radicalism, a community leader said on Wednesday, as police began to arrest those who fought emergency crews in a riot triggered by the attack. Monday evening's attack, which injured Bishop Marie Emmanuel of the Assyrian Christ the Good Shepherd Church, has been deemed a terrorist attack motivated by suspected religious extremism. Lebanese Muslim Association Secretary Gamal Key told Reuters the boy's father had seen no signs of radicalism in his son. He said other than him being rebellious, to him there were no signs. There were absolutely no signs to him, said Keir, who was with the man when he left his home to take shelter in a local mosque on Monday. Police said the family of the alleged attacker temporarily moved out of their Western Sydney home for fear of reprisals. The stabbing has stirred fears of persecution among the Syrian community. About 40% of Australia's 42,000-strong Assyrian population live in the area around the church. It is very devastating. The Assyrian community have come from Iraq because they have been persecuted for being Christian, said Maria, whose family migrated from Iraq in 1993. She declined to give her last name. Monday's attack on our faith is just an old reminder of what happened back home. The city's Muslim community is also on alert. The Lebanese Muslim Association said the Lakemba Mosque in Sydney's southwest, one of Australia's largest, had received firebomb threats on Monday night. We've had to employ 2 security guards to protect the mosque, he said. The church incident was the second major stabbing attack in 3 days in Australia's most populous city after 6 people were killed in a knife attack at a mall near Bondi Beach on Saturday. The shopping